Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the EFSA webinar on the TSE reporting tool. My name is Yves van der Stede, and I'm a Senior Scientific Officer in EFSA. And since the last 3 years, I coordinated activities related to the annual report on TSE surveillance. This is a report that summarizes all TSE surveillance data from 31 reporting countries in the EU, according legislation 999/2001. This report is every year published by EFSA by the end of November.
Good morning, I'm Mario Monguidi, I'm Data Officer in EFSA, and I coordinated the development of the tool. You can follow this webinar in the following hour, or you can also later on access the EFSA channel on YouTube, because this webinar will be recorded and posted there. We are using Adobe Connect as the tool to broadcast this webinar. This webinar will be held in English, and you can see on your screen on the right a question and answer box, so you can put there any question. Please use English as well, and we will try to answer to your question during this webinar. In the bottom you can see also a technical chat box, so if you experience any technical issues, please send a message to us so that we can try to support you. And then you can see the presentation window where we will broadcast the presentation and also some help with the live tool.
Thank you, Mario. We are here today to show you how you can submit the TSE surveillance data with the tool that EFSA developed for that purpose. We are not here alone today. We will be supported by Alban, who developed that tool, and by Maria Francesca, who tested intensively this tool and helped us to organize this webinar. So both of them will come on later in explaining the steps of the webinar further on. In the background, we have our colleagues Angel, Davide, and Anka, who will be able to reply to your questions during the webinar you might have along the process.
And we will also have a final session with question and answer, so we will try to answer lively to some of your questions. Okay, now let's start. I hope you all managed to download and install the tool and to practice a bit during the last few weeks.
Yes, that's important. And before we start, Mario, I would like to stress that the tool has been developed to submit TSE surveillance data according legislation 999/2001 and its amendments. The amendments were mainly done for chronic wasting disease in cervids. You will see that the tool follows a logic flow of submitting aggregated data followed by case data, as it was the case with the PDF forms of the Commission. However, the tool allows you to combine both in what we will call a monthly report. It's important to stress that this webinar is not for countries that submit or will submit directly XML files to EFSA. We will later see in the webinar that the monthly reports will contain data from aggregated tested data together with case data without the need to combine, to separate these two into, as it was done for the PDF files.
Exactly. We will try to mimic a real scenario, so we will go through all the steps from the creation to the population of the monthly report, and these are exactly the same steps you will have to follow during the data submission process. The tool allows you to submit data related to BSE in cattle, scrapie in sheep and goats, Cwd in cervids, and also random genotyping in sheep, and TSE in other species, for example cats. The tool has some built-in functionality that allows you to validate locally the data prior to submitting them to the EFSA data collection framework. At the end of the webinar, we will also briefly explain what happened during the scientific data validation and how data are included in the scientific data warehouse.
Thank you, Mario. And before we really start, I would like to stress that we have provided a manual which describes in detail all the steps we will explain here in the webinar. So the manual has been provided as a wiki on a GitHub platform, for which you see here a screenshot. So important to say that this manual will also be launched in your browser once you have launched the tool.
Yes. In the next section, with the support of our colleague Alban, we will guide you through the creation and the opening of a report. Hello Alban.
Hello Mario.
Is the tool already installed?
Yes, it is. So as we can see from the shared screen, this is the first page that the TSEs users will see after launching the tool. The page is called Aggregated Data, and it is mainly the first stage that the data provider has to fill in order to continue with the submission process. Because the software is based on a structural level, I suggest you to follow the level name of the page situated on the top left corner of the screen as we move through each level into the tool during this presentation.
Yes, and if you have any doubt, please consider that we have this icon with a question mark. Clicking on this button, you will see that the manual is automatically opened and you will be automatically redirected to the relevant page. In the wiki, you can see that on the right there is a table of content, and this table of content reflects the process of data submission. Also consider that this document is an open document, so we will update it regularly, also based on the feedback that we receive from you and other users. Alban, did you already fill in the settings? Settings?
Yes, I have. So for the first time that we launch the tool, it will automatically ask us to fill up both even the user settings and the preferences. Those two levels are really important for the tool because are taken in consideration during some internal analysis. In my case, this is not the first time that I launch the tool, so for being able to accede to the user setting page, I click on the dedicated button into the main menu. So after clicking on it, I see that the user settings page appears. Here we have a table which allows us to fill in the credentials, mainly the username, the password, and the organization code provided by EFSA. On the left side, we can see the data check column, which is used by the tool for printing out warning messages that will guide the end user during the filling process. Just before saving this information with the Save button, make sure that your laptop is correctly connected to internet, since at this stage the tool will require an internet connection in order to check if the user exists or not into the data collection framework. And you can do that by clicking on the Test Connection button.
Very good. Now let's move to the preferences. Pay attention when you are setting the preferences, because this information later on will be used to pre-fill part of the information which are contained in the monthly report.
So yes, as we did for the user settings, I click on the dedicated button into the main menu, and here we have the preferences page. Before checking together what are the information required at this stage, I wanted to note that mainly into the tool there are three kinds of columns. We have the mandatory columns, which are represented with an asterisk symbol. Then we have the conditionally mandatory ones, which are represented with the tilde symbol, and those columns are mandatory only under specific condition. Otherwise, they can be empty. Then we have the non-mandatory columns, which has not a symbol assigned. So as we can see into the preferences page, we have only mandatory and non-mandatory columns. So starting from the left, we have the data check column that we saw also on the user settings. Then we have the country column, which is mandatory. And from here, we can select the reporting country. So let's, for example, in this case, select Finland. And of course, all the information that we will fill during this presentation has the only purpose to showing you how to correctly use the tool. Then going further, we have the Cwd extended context mandatory column, which refer to the mandatory surveillance for Cwd. Only the 6 member states, which are Estonia, Finland, Lithuania, Poland, and Sweden, must choose yes, and instead all the other countries, for example, can choose no. Then going further, we have the screening. We have other columns regarding the screening, the confirmatory, and the discriminatory test for BSc, scrapie, and Cwd. In every column, we have a drop-down list in which we can select the value of interest. So Mario, which is the value which I have to choose, for example, for screening?
So here you have to choose the most commonly used analytical method for each type of TSE and for each test type. So for the screening, the confirmatory and the discriminatory, you need to choose the one that is the more commonly used. In this case, we are mimicking the methods which are used in Finland. These information are relevant because they will be used to prefill the monthly report at a later stage. And in any case, the data provider can change the value also after this setting. So it is not an issue.
Okay, thank you. Why the confirmatory tests are not mandatory?
Very good question. In some of the country, the confirmatory test is not executed, and the discriminatory test is used to both confirm and to type the TSE. You have to take into account that within a country, the diagnostic process that we also call testing scheme is not varying that much. So we suppose that if a confirmatory test has not been selected here, the tool will apply the testing scheme without the confirmatory test. All the testing schemes are detailed in the wiki as well. Okay,
thank you. And what happens if the data provider does not find the analytical method inside the values which are proposed into the drop-down list?
Yeah, each user can ask to Zonal support to extend this list.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we are done with the setup of the user settings and the preferences, so we can move back into the first page, into the aggregated data one, and from here we can create a report by clicking on the file drop-down list and then selecting the new report option. From this page we can see that every column is already pre-filled based on what we have chosen during the setup of the preferences. So we have the data check, the reporting here, and that of course we can modify this value. Then we have the reporting month, and as we can see, the tool is proposing us the preceding month of the current one. So now we are in January, and the tool is proposing December. Let's, for example, select September as an example for this presentation. Then we have the reporting country and the dataset ID, which is a unique ID for the report. As we can see here, we have the not applicable message because we haven't submitted yet the report. Then we have the report status, but my colleague Yves and Maria Francesca will go more in detail on those last two information.
Yeah, remember that is only possible to create the same report once. So when you click on create button, the tool will in the background check against the data collection framework if a report has been already created before. So it is important that all the samples collected within a certain month are included in the related monthly report and submitted only once to EFSA.
Okay, so I have already created the report, so I close this page, and in order to open the report again, I click on the file drop-down list and I select the open report option. From this page, we see all the reports which has been created locally into the tool. So I select the one of interest, the one that I have just created, so for September, and then I click on the open button. As we can see, after opening a report, some information will be filled into the tool. For example, the one which are under the label page's name. What is the meaning of this information?
Yeah, we simply have the indication of the year and the month. Then we have the status, as you were saying before. When I create a new report, the status is draft, and the status change during the data submission process. Then we have two IDs, the message ID and the dataset ID, which have not been assigned yet, and they will be automatically assigned by the data collection framework and populated by the tool. These IDs are quite relevant in case a data provider needs to access the data collection framework user interface to check for the status of a certain dataset. Remember that each monthly report is related to a DCF dataset. And then they are also relevant in case a user needs to ask for support to the zoonosis support.
Okay.
Now we leave the floor to Maria Francesca and to Yves that will guide you through the population of a monthly report.
Okay, hello Maria Francesca.
Hello. From the previous section, you know now how to fill the user settings, how to select the preferences, and how to create a report and how to open it.
Okay, so let's now start by populating the monthly report, and we will start with monitoring of BSE in cattle. So we will add aggregated data, which we call level 1. In case there are positive cases, we will go to what we call case data or level 2 data. So please, Maria Francesca, click on monitoring of BSE and add a new row by clicking on the corresponding button, new row. As you can see here, we added a line which is actually representing tested samples from bovine animals which are actually aggregated in batches according to the mandatory fields, which are in this case species, age class, and target group.
So type, species, and husbandry system are pre-filled. So let's focus on age class. The tested animals belong to the age class 24-35 months, and the target group is fallen stock. Then sex is pre-filled with mixed females and males. Then we have information on the test. The first test type is screening, and I found pre-filled here the test that was selected in the preferences, but there is still the option to select another one. Then we have the columns on herd flock status and PSUID, which are not applicable for monitoring of BSE. Here we reach the numbers, so we can enter the number of tested animals that were negative, 10. We have 0 positive cases, 0 inconclusive, and the total number of tested animals is automatically calculated by the tool. We have 0 unsuitable sample, and the last code is a unique code that identifies the row, and is called ProgID. But why there are inconclusive and unsuitable sample here, Yves?
Good question. So the inconclusive data field is foreseen as described in the wiki to submit pending results. So in case you would have pending results for which you don't have the final results yet, you can add there the number of samples that are still inconclusive. However, we recommend you all not to submit inconclusive samples, but only to submit in the monthly report the final results you might have in your surveillance. The unsuitable data field, however, describes the number of samples that were submitted but could not be tested for any reason you can think of. Therefore, the unsuitable samples don't make the sum of the total tested samples in the tool.
Okay, now that I have completed this row, I would like to enter data of other tested cattle, but from the same target group, but from a different age class.
Yes.
Should I refill everything again?
No, so the tool foresees a clone function. You can actually copy the first row by clicking on clone records, and you copy exactly the aggregated data from your first row. So this allows you to copy the first batch, and you can change the age class accordingly, and of course your number of negative, positive, or inconclusive tested samples in that row. Okay.
The data check field now says okay. What the data check field is about?
Yes, so the data check fields in the first column helps the user during the submission of the data. It actually checks internally your monthly report to say, or it checks actually if your data are completed, yes or no, and if your monthly report is ready to be submitted or not. So here you see 2 rows that were submitted for bovine animals. In this example, we will not show you how we submit here a positive case because most of the countries will submit for bovine animals negative results. So we will add a positive case when we explain now for scrapie in sheep. So to add a line for scrapie in sheep, you do exactly the same. You click on new row for monitoring of scrapie.
So let's start with the species. We select sheep. The husbandry system is pre-filled. The age class of the tested animal is of more than 48 months. The target group is not slaughtered for human consumption. Then I just follow the same procedure as for BSC data reporting. But here, for herd and flock status, I found 2 options, not infected and infected. Which one do I choose?
Yes, so for sheep and goats, the herd flock status data field is an important field. So in case in that batch of sheep, you find for the first time in a flock an animal which is positive, you should select here from flock status not infected. If, however, you detect later on the same herd other cases or secondary cases, you should report flock status from infected flocks. So in summary, when you have index cases, we urge you to report these as herd status from non-infected flocks, while all secondary cases or non-index cases should be reported from flocks with infected flock status.
Oh, as you can see now, data check field says check positive cases. That means that we have to enter the sample level data. So by right-clicking on the row, we select Open Sample Form. And we are now in sample level data. Here we can find on the top of the page all the information that links the case to the aggregated data level. And again, we start filling the mandatory fields, such as the sample case assessment, that means the case type. In this case, it's a typical scrapie. Then I complete the sample ID. Then I found pre-filled the anatomical part, but there is the option to select other part, of course. And then I continue with the next mandatory field, that is national case ID.
Okay, while Maria Francesca is completing that row for the atypical case in sheep, I would like to pay your attention to the national case ID. This national case ID number put here should be a unique identifier for your country for all cases you submit in your country. So, and you should be able to trace that national case ID towards your national database. Another important data field to fill in is the year of birth. Please pay attention there that your year of birth is corresponding to your age class you have been submitted in your aggregated data form. So here it's above 48 months. So please pay attention that your year of birth is corresponding to that one. So Maria Francesca now completed the whole row for the atypical scrapie case, and you can see that the data check field is asking for us add test results. This means that the tool is requesting us to open a third level form, which is called the analytical results form, as you can see here now. So here we are opening now the third level of the reporting.
Again, we can find all the information on the top of the page that links the case to the sample level data. And now the analytical test results form is very important because it allows you to check if the diagnostic protocol is the correct one. This is the one assigned in the preferences. In fact, you can find the test type, the screening and the discriminatory test, but you can also enter the genotype. In this case, we will enter the genotype, and we can also add an additional test done. For example, by clicking on Add New Row, we can also add a confirmatory test, such as immunohistochemistry. So we can add also the test results. So the diagnostic protocol is the correct one. How can I save the page now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the tool, you should not save anything in the tool. Everything is saved automatically. So don't look for a button to save. You can just save the things by closing the report. So to go back to your aggregated monthly report, you can close the third level, you can close the sample form level, the second level, and now we are back to our aggregated data or our monthly report, in which we have now submitted 2 rows for bovine animals and 1 row for scrapie and sheep, for which we have added a positive atypical case in this example. So let's now continue by adding Cwd data.
Is the workflow similar for entering data on Cwd?
Exactly. So you apply the same process, you click on monitoring of Cwd, you click the button new row, and you add here again the data for Cwd. So here you have completed all the mandatory fields for Cwd. Please pay attention for those countries that have been selected, extended context, yes, in the beginning, they should provide us with some extra information compared to the other countries for which the Cwd surveillance monitoring is not mandatory. So in case, for a positive case as shown here by Maria Francesca, you open the sample form and in the case level, you will see here now appearing 2 lines for that positive case. 1 for OBEX and 1 for retropharyngeal lymph nodes, as it is foreseen in the legislation. So 2 lines will automatically be created. In case you have only tested 1 sample, you can simply delete a record as shown here, and you complete the full data as the mandatory fields for the case level. So here Maria Francesca is completing the national case ID, as you can see here. Once that is done, again in Cwd, you will see in the data check field, add test results. So she will here open, as in the same way for scrapie, the level 3 form, for which you see here the diagnostic test you provided during the settings. So again, we added now Cwd data. We can go back to our aggregated data form by closing level 3, level 2, and we are now back to our monthly report. So what about the monitoring of TSE for other species?
It follows exactly the same process. So I will add a new row and I continue just filling the mandatory fields.
Okay. So that's nice. The tool foresees indeed to add also TSE surveillance testing on animals, on species other than bovine animals, sheep, and cervids, as it is done and explained, or as an example here. So we added here cats. And what about random genotyping, Maria Francesca, which is the last option in the column here?
Yeah, I select from the drop-down menu random genotype and random genotyping, and I add a new row. And here we don't have to fill any more information at this level. So we just follow what data check suggests. So add sample info. By right-clicking on the row, we select open sample form. So we are now in sample level data, and we start entering the mandatory field requested by the tool. So the sample ID, the anatomical part is pre-filled, but you can still have the option to change it, and the age of each genotyped animal. Then we follow the suggestion of the data check field, that is add test details. So by right-clicking on the row, we open analytical results form. Here we can enter the genotype. And after it, data check says OK. So everything is automatically saved, so we can go back to the sample level data and repeat the process for each random genotype we want to enter.
So now, actually, Maria Francesca is adding a second line for a second sheep, for which she now adds the genotype for that second sheep. So if you want to report an allele which is not supported or foreseen in the drop-down list, we foresee there the option, and you should report the option ZZZZ, which is for us an unknown genotype. So Here we add the two lines, and remember that currently the tool does not foresee the clone function in random genotyping. So for random genotyping, the sheep should be added one by one. So closing the level 3 and the level 2, we are now back to our monthly reports that is actually containing 2 rows for cattle, 1 for sheep, in which we have foreseen a positive atypical case. We have a line for CWD with a positive case, and we have also a line for other species cats, and we added 2 sheep for random genotyping, for which we have foreseen the genotype. So this is actually a completely monthly report, and now we are actually able to select the check function, as you can see here in the toolbar. Clicking on the check function allows an internal validation to see if your monthly report is fine or not. In case of errors, your internet browser will provide you with a list of errors. Here you see a list of errors that can show up when you click on the check button. So in that case, you have 3 errors, 1 for species, 1 for sex, and there was no case that was specified for the random genotyping.
In case there are no error or inconsistencies, then you will receive a message that informs you that the report is correct and can be sent to DCF. In addition, the status on the top of the page will change to locally validated, and also the toolbar will have 2 buttons activated, edit and send. After clicking on send, your monthly report will be sent to DCF. DCF will conduct a validation applying a number of business rules, and then you have to wait until you receive 2 mails that will inform you of the results of the process. We suggest you to pay attention on the dataset status, and it will be valid if there are no errors detected. In fact, after refreshing the status of your monthly report, you will find the status as valid, and the button Submit will be active for the final submission to Data Warehouse.
Okay, thank you, Maria Francesca. I think here we have shown how you can populate a monthly report, and Mario and Alban will further explain you how you can submit your data in EFSA Data Warehouse. So for the moment we are done, so don't run away. We will change the setting now for leaving Alban and Mario to show you the further steps. For us, we are done. We hope you find it interesting, and thanks for your attention. Bye.
Bye.
So now, Alban, we are at the final steps of our data submission process. As we saw, now the dataset is in status valid. We saw also that the message ID and the dataset ID are filled in because the DCF assigned an ID to this dataset. And then remember that every time you receive a notification of a change of the status from DCF, you need to click on the refresh status. Now, when you are in the valid status, it is possible to click on submit. What does it mean to submit a dataset? It means that the data are, the data provider considers that the data are correct, and so the data now can be seen also by scientific officer in EFSA. So when you click on submit, then you, as a data provider, you are done. You don't need to do anything more with your monthly report.
Okay. You can check also the submitted report either by accessing directly to the data collection framework or at a later stage by accessing the standard validation reports into MicroStrategy. Please be aware that the inclusion of the data into the data warehouse may take some time and usually occurs overnight.
Yes, exactly. And when the data are in MicroStrategy and all these reports are available, also scientific officer of EFSA will perform further validation. This phase is called scientific validation. In case of any issue, the scientific officer will contact you the same way as done in the previous years and will ask for correction. Instead, if everything is fine, you will be asked to further accept the data in the MicroStrategy report, and this will trigger the real consolidation of the data within the scientific data warehouse. So you will receive again a notification from DCF, you will have to refresh the status, and then your local status also will be accepted data warehouse. So, in case of any doubt, please keep in touch with the zoonosis support functional mailbox, and we will try to support you as much as possible. After this practical section, I hope you will be more familiar with the tool and you will be able to submit your data. Now, I think we have time for some questions. So while we are waiting for our colleagues to forward some questions, I would like to remember you that DCF will not be available from tomorrow until the end of the month due to an extraordinary system maintenance. So let's see if we have some question.
Yes, so we have our first question from Marta. So what happens if after the submission to data collection framework the data have to be changed? So thank you, Marta, for the question. So actually, when the data provider has submitted the report and he finds out that he wants to make some modification in the report, he can contact us, he can just contact us, and EFSA will reject the report. Once we reject the report, then an email will come out and notify you of the change of the status, that the status of the report has changed, and hence you can open the TSE tool again and you can click on the refresh status button. Then you will see that the status of the report will change from submission sent to rejected editable, and with this status some of the buttons into the toolbar will be enabled. So for example the edit one, so you can click on that and you can modify the information inside the report, and when you are done you can submit the report again to EFSA. Thank you.
Thank you, Alban. Let's see if there is another question. Okay, so we have a question from Jan. What happens if after the acceptance into the data warehouse the data has to be changed? Okay, again it is possible. So when you are when data have been consolidated into the data warehouse, also the local status should be refreshed and the status will be accepted data warehouse. In this case, there is a button called amend, and this button, if you click this button, the tool will create a new version of the report. So instead of seeing the year and the month, you will see here month revision 1, and that means this is the first revision of a previously accepted monthly report. So this new version of the report will be in status draft, and you will have to follow again exactly the same process you followed the first time. In this case, the tool will upload at the end to DCF only changes, so only the things that you have amended in your monthly report.
Okay, so
there is another question,
yes,
Alban?
We have another question from Lauren. So it is possible to work on the tool without internet connection? So that's a nice question. It is possible to work on the tool without internet connection, but there are two stages mainly in which an internet connection is required. So during the login process, because the tool has to check if the credentials existing to the data collection framework, and during the submission or the refresh of the status of the report. In all the other cases, instead, you can use the tool without internet connection. So, for example, you can modify a report that you have already created into the tool, and when you are done with that, you can submit it, but in that case, you need a connection.
Okay,
yes, very
clear. So we have another question, okay, from Katie. What do you mean by scientific validation of data? Okay, you have to submit for each month a different monthly report. When you are done with all the data of a certain year, so you submitted 12 different monthly reports, one for each month, then you can wait for the validation performed by the scientific officer. The scientific officer will check your data also against the data that you submitted the previous years, and in case of detection of any anomaly, they will contact you. In case instead of a successful scientific validation, as explained before, you will be asked to access the MicroStrategy report, to accept the data also in the validation report, and this will trigger the consolidation of the data in the EFSA scientific data warehouse, and also the inclusion of this data in the EU summary report.
Mm-hmm. So I think we have another question coming out from Christine. So it is possible to use the tool on other platforms, such as, for example, macOS X. So currently the tool is only available for Windows OS users. We are still developing it and try to make everything fluent and working properly. But of course, as we are happy with it, then we will start to develop a compatible version for other platforms, such as, for example, the macOS X one. Yes.
Very good, thank you. So now we have another question. So what we have to do in case we have a report which is very similar to a previous one? Should we refill in all the combination of target groups, age classes, and species? Okay, this is a very good question, and really this is the case because in most of the countries, let's say, the combination of target groups, age classes, and species is somehow recurrent. So we thought, I don't know, Alban, if you want to explain.
Okay. Yes.
We have a functionality.
So yes. So for example, here we are in the report of September, the one that our colleagues Eve and Francesca created and filled in. So here we can close the report. Here we see we have another report, which is the one for August, which is empty. We open it, and from here we click on the file drop-down list, and then we select the import aggregated data option. From here we can select the one that was filled in before, so the one for September, and then we click into the import button. So the tool is printing out a message, and we want to proceed. Yes, so we click on the OK button, and as we can see, now also the report of August is filled in with the information of September, of the report of September.
Yes, exactly. You see that all the numbers are set to 0, because of course the number of tested animals, we suppose this is not the same in different months, and also all the data which are related to the sample case level are cleaned, so only the aggregated data are imported.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see if there are other questions. So yes, another one. Okay, what I have to do in case I upload the data to DCF, they are valid, but I still need to apply changes before submitting the data. Okay, this is also a very good question. I go back to the previous slide. So you see that when a dataset is valid, there is of course the capability to submit this report, and this will somehow freeze the data on the local side, because data will be submitted to EFSA and they are available for the scientific officer for the validation. But instead of clicking on submit, it's still possible to click on edit and this will bring back the dataset to the draft status, and so the data provider will be able to apply all the needed changes.
Okay, I think we are done with the questions.
Yes, so this is all for today. Thank you for attending this webinar. We hope you will be able to successfully submit the data. Please remember this webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to see it also on our EFSA channel on YouTube. And I want to remember you that DCF will not be available starting from tomorrow until the end of the month due to maintenance of the system. And please remember also that you have to submit your data on TSE by the end of March.
And in addition, feel free to continue to add your questions to the Q&A box, and we will try to dedicate a few more minutes after the presentation in order to address them all. And the last suggestion is always to read the wiki page and all the news that we publish into the GitHub platform. Where of course you can find, if you don't find the information, just come back to us and contact us, and we will try to help you.
So we are done. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.